probably heard of Pax Romani, the peace of the whole Roman Empire. Well, it wasn't happening in Jerusalem. And so they decided to besiege Jerusalem to stop food and water from getting in, to try and calm down and sort out these Judeans, these problematic, troublesome people. Now, one of the very first rabbis, called Yokhanan ben Zakkai, realized that the power of the Romans and the siege that they were putting on Jerusalem was going to destroy Jerusalem and the Judeans. And indeed, he expected it would also destroy the center of their religious belief, the Second Temple, now under threat by Rome. So nobody was allowed out of Jerusalem unless they died. The Romans understood that they didn't want a plague that might happen if there were dead bodies left around, and so they allowed people who had died to come out. And Yokhanan ben Zakkai came up with a plan, and his plan was to get his students, his disciples, to put him inside a coffin and to tell the Roman soldiers that their teacher had died and they were taking him out to bury him. The soldiers let him out with the disciples, and they carried his coffin out, and when they were safely out of Jerusalem, they opened the coffin and they let Yokhanan ben Zakkai out, and he went to Vespasian, who was in charge of the Roman legions, and he went to Vespasian and he said to Vespasian, "You have no argument with me. I believe in a peaceful religious life, one that respects the authority of Rome, as long as it lets me believe and practice my religion in freedom." And the Emperor Vespasian realized that they had no argument with Jews because they weren't problematic in other parts of the land of Israel, only in Jerusalem. And so he said to Yokhanan ben Zakkai, "You have my blessing to set up an academy to train leaders and rabbis, as long as they are teaching peace and harmony and cooperation and are not in conflict with Rome." And that's exactly what happened. And Yokhanan ben Zakkai and his disciples started a new academy, and it was called Yavneh. And they made Tiberias the center for a whole new generation of rabbinic life and teaching and Jewish scholarship. And indeed, Yokhanan ben Zakkai was right. The Roman siege of Jerusalem succeeded. They broke into Jerusalem. They set fire to the temple. Many Jerusalemites were killed and lost their lives. But Yokhanan ben Zakkai and his disciples were able to continue teaching Judaism. Just before Jerusalem fell, another group also realized that the end was in sight for Jerusalem and for the temple. And that was the Zakkai, the Zealots. But they didn't go to Vespasian and the Romans. They didn't want to make peace with the Romans. They despised the Romans. They, given the opportunity, would have taken their knives to the Romans. And what they did instead was they went to a fortress in the desert, not very far from Jerusalem, a fortress which had been built as a palace, a fortified palace, by King Herod, the same King Herod who'd expanded the Second Temple into this huge, magnificent temple. He also built himself a winter palace. Jerusalem's a bit wet and cold in the winter, and he wanted to go somewhere warm and sunny, but not too far from Jerusalem. And in the desert, down by the Dead Sea, he located just the right place, this rocky outcrop, which was very easy to defend, and on which he built a beautiful, magnificent palace. But it wasn't in use anymore, and the Zealots went and conquered it, took it over, and they found stores at the top, all of the best food and grains, oil, plenty of water, which had drained from the surrounding deserts when they had flash floods through special channels that the architects had made for Herod. There were cisterns all the way around the top of this desert mountain, full of water, even a swimming pool at the top that they could enjoy in the hot sun. And so the Zealots went up there, and some hundreds of Zealots lived up there. The Romans destroyed Jerusalem. They burnt the temple to the ground, and then they took the Jerusalemites they'd captured, they took them out to the desert, and they started them in a massive project. It took them 3 years or more to build a huge ramp up to the top of Masada. And eventually they took a battering ram and they broke into the Zealots at the top of Masada. And the story is that they found almost none of them alive. And so it's important to see these two stories. On the one hand, the violent Zealots and Yokhanan ben Zakkai, who carried on teaching what became our rabbinic Jewish tradition, that still 2,000 years later, we learn about and study and do every time we come to Cheder, every time we come to Shabbat, every time we come to festivals. We continue Yokhanan ben Zakkai's living a religious life, but under whatever peaceful authority we find ourselves today. So on the one hand, Yokhanan ben Zakkai, on the other hand, the Zealots. God says to us in the Torah, I place before you life and death, blessing and curse. Choose life, so that you and your children may live. Ask yourself, which did the Zealots choose? And which did Yokhanan ben Zakkai choose?